Did witches really exist? What was behind witch hunts, persecutions, and burnings? Let's tackle the Massachusetts Salem Witch Trials that took place in 1692 with Scott Rank of the History Unplugged podcast.
The Salem Witch Trials. Salem began as a limited witch hunt aimed at notorious women. The local magistrates, John Hawthorne, Jonathan Corwin, and Bartholomew Genny, presided over the first phase of examinations. Beginning with Sarah Good, Hawthorne interrogated the defendants in an attempt to force confessions. Questions led with an assumption of guilt. Rather than asking whether Good injured the 4 children, Hawthorne asked why she did it. Good claimed her innocence, and each denial of guilt evoked a series of fits from the 4 afflicted girls. Finally, Good accused Osborne, but when the magistrates examined Osborne, much the same occurred. But it was when the court finally heard from Tituba that Salem exploded into an unprecedented affair. Tituba confessed to being a witch under Hawthorne's pressure, and that confession yielded several dramatic results. First, the afflictions of the girls ceased, confirming that confessions were the best way to prevent future harm to the girls and to legitimate the actions of the court. Also, Tituba's confession enabled her to detail the actions of other witches, her supposed accomplices. According to the trusted Puritan theologian William Perkins, a confessed witch who accused others offered valid testimony against them. Tituba explained that Good and Osborne had forced her to harm the girls, and the court believed her. So you see this constant shifting of blame that's going on. Tituba also offered several elements in her confession, all guided by Judge Hawthorne, that became routine in future confessions, mentioning the Devil's Book, the witches' meetings, descriptions of a black man, satanic masses, and the naming of other suspects. Tituba claimed also that Good and Osborne didn't act alone. She eventually testified to a total of 9 witches, but she couldn't say who they were. Suddenly, a full witch conspiracy was underway, in which Puritan residents of New England thought they were in the middle of a spiritual war. Now there was a quest to unmask these foes. Ann Putnam Jr. took the lead in identifying these other witches. One identified was Dorothy Good, Sarah's 4-year-old daughter. Then, Martha Corey, a member of Samuel Parish's church, and Rebecca Nurse, a widely respected matriarch and member of the nearby Salem Town Church, and a grandmother in the community. Those who acted as if they were afflicted multiplied. Adults began to suffer fits, including Ann's mother and Tituba's husband, and the fits spread to Mary Warren, the servant of John and Elizabeth Proctor. John Proctor responded by beating her, which seemed to cure her of the problem, and he said that if he were left alone with Tituba's husband, John Indian, he could beat the devil out of him as well. When Mary recovered and returned against the afflicted turned against her. She was accused of witchcraft herself. Before the judges, Mary claimed that the afflicted persons did but dissemble. Fits ensued, and they were so convincing in their performance that Mary reacted with fits of her own to show that she herself was bewitched, and taken back to prison, unable to speak. Mary confessed the next day in court to signing the Devil's Book, but only because she had been tricked into doing it by the Proctors. Then she accused Giles Corey. She rejoined the ranks of the afflicted and spun out accusations in tandem with them, which saved her own life but cost the lives of many more. These examinations of accused witches continued, but until June, they hadn't been able to proceed to actual trials because the colony lacked an official charter and an ability to try capital offenses. The newly appointed governor, William Phipps, arrived from England in June with a new charter, hearing about the crisis in Salem, and immediately established a court of oyer and terminer, or to hear and determine. Full of high-ranking officials from Boston, the court could move from the initial depositions, testimonials, and examinations to grand jury indictments and final jury trials. The court first tried Bridget Bishop on June 2nd. The trial proceeded quickly, and on June 10th, she was hanged. The Salem witch hunt paused at this point. Accusations and examinations had swept up a series of accused witches, mostly from the vicinity of Salem Village, but now it had executed its first witch, a woman who refused to confess even on the scaffold. Before proceeding, the magistrates wanted some approval from Puritan ministers. Asking their thoughts on the matter, several ministers took 2 days to respond. Their response suggested caution, especially in the use of spectral evidence, or seeing someone's specter or shape harming either oneself or another. The judges at Salem approached spectral evidence in direct violation of precedent and principle. Although the ministers urged caution in this regard, They didn't condemn overtly the proceedings or the judges, and ended by encouraging a vigorous prosecution. So this is what the court wanted to hear. The court pressed on, turning its attention to a second phase of the Salem Witch Trials to the nearby town of Andover, where a great number of accused quickly confessed. And many of them did so in hopes that this would save their lives with a lesser punishment. In total, at the end of the trials, 19 were executed, 1 man was pressed to death between boards, and at least 5 died in jail, until Governor Phipps closed down the court of hearing and determination. Phipps created another court to hear the remaining cases, and the second court cleared the jails, refused to accept former confessions, and acquitted all but 3. Governor Phipps immediately reprieved the convicted 3. No one else died for witchcraft in New England after that. What on earth happened? What are explanations of the Salem witch trial? Van Engen notes that most scholars agree on the basic narrative of the Salem witch trials. But why it happened is far from clear. What made Salem go so wrong? Scholars have always emphasized the role of religion in the Salem witch hunt, but it wasn't just religion. It was a certain type of religious understanding filtered through extraordinary circumstances taking place. It was sort of a perfect storm. In the book Satan and Salem, Benjamin Ray argues that far from being precipitated by a single key person or circumstances, the Salem crisis was a result of a perfect storm of factors. And this idea of a perfect storm is multiple factors coming together, such as King William's War, economic instability, the lack of a stable government in Salem and no official colony charter, the inexperience of the new governor, the past failings of ruling magistrates, the community feeling threatened by outside forces, and the personalities of Samuel Parris, Thomas Putnam, and many others. Overall, what mattered most, it's what these researchers argue, was that New England Puritans, in the midst of these crises, saw themselves as God's chosen people at war with a newly unleashed and angered Satan. They wanted to win this war, and the most self-assured Puritans became convinced they could win it by purging the land of all those who allied themselves with Satan and Satan's causes. They came to see the devil anywhere, and they sought to defeat him everywhere. Most of the writings about New England during the 1600s revolve around the Puritans. It concludes with the Salem witch trials, and then nothing after. It's almost as if after the Puritans disappear. I can't find anything about the Puritans in the 1700s or beyond. What happened? My theory is that in the 1700s, with more people, that meant less of them by percentage were Puritans, so less coverage was given to them. Also, with more events happening in the 1700s, the less interesting Puritans went from less coverage to no coverage. Where the Puritans in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, once we get into the 18th century, proportionately, they're less and less a percentage of New England, and they don't have as much impact as they did before, even though Puritan religious culture still stays very strong in New England for centuries to come. One book that has cast a long shadow on how we understood the Salem witch trial and other events of mass hysteria is the 1841 book, Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. This book was published by Scottish journalist Charles Mackay in 1841, and he had 3 sections to the book: National Delusions, Peculiar Follies, and Philosophical Delusions. And the subjects of Mackay's debunking include alchemy, duels, crusades, fortune-telling, holy relics, but then he includes other things like economic bubbles. And a popular quote of his is that men think in herds. It will be seen that they go mad in herds, while they only recover their senses slowly and one by one. And him likening an economic bubble to the same forces of hysteria as the Salem witch trials is very interesting. In history, mass delusion wasn't just exotic events like the Salem witch hunt in 1692, but we could also tie into more mainstream events. And also, with the broad overview of the psychological processes that can explain mass delusions or mass psychosis or mass hysteria, and to psychology and look at different psychological theories that explain how mass delusions can take place, such as the most notorious case of mass delusion, and that was the Salem witch trials.
I'm Mark Vinette, and I hope you're enjoying the ride.